You're here. Welcome to the Masterminding Success podcast. They say if you want to be successful in business and in life, then surround yourself with successful people. So pull up a seat. The mastermind is about to begin.
Glad you could join us for another episode of the Masterminding Success podcast. We're your hosts, Keith Wheeler
and Nuria Kobi.
And what are we talking about today, Nuria?
Today we're going to talk about why your books aren't selling. And we get that question a lot, don't we? People keep asking us, I've published a book and it's not selling. What can I do?
Yeah. Every day I get that question, whether it's on, YouTube or social media or whatever, or in person. Yeah, that's one of the most common questions I get is, my books aren't selling. Why?
Absolutely.
Or you get people who quit because their books aren't selling and they didn't ask why,
Yeah.
So I think this is a good question for anybody, even if you're just starting out, but also if you've been doing this for a while and maybe your books aren't selling anymore. Maybe they used to sell, now they don't. There's probably a handful of main reasons why your book probably isn't selling. And so you just earmark this episode and or jot it down and try these out and see which ones help.
See which one it is.
Yeah. And I think the first part is you need to step back and be honest with yourself about your book. I know it's our book baby and we want to cherish it and we want to protect it from the world. But if you want to make sales, then you have to, step back and be honest. Look at it from your customer's point of view or your potential customer's point of view. And that's the key to being able to figure out if any of these other reasons that we're going to talk about, if they really are relevant to your book. Because if you look at it through, rose-colored glasses and everything's all, peachy, you're going to say my book is perfect. None of these are true. Well, guess what? Then your book's probably still not going to sell.
Mm.
If you don't make any changes, the results are not going to change.
That's right.
Something has to change, and sometimes multiple things need to change in order for the results to change.
Yeah. And I think we can both talk from experience as well, because I know that in my case, not all of my books sell. I mean, that would be nice, but they don't. And I've got a lot of books that just never sell. And I've got a lot of books that used to sell. I mean, the books that really propelled me into a full-time income on Amazon KDP, they're not selling that much now. So I could then now turn around and say, well, why are they not selling anymore? And I have analyzed it. I tried to find a reason. And I've also got books that sell now and again, and then they stop selling, and then they come back again. So there is a real mix of what can sell and what can't sell. There is no consistency, I would say. I think if anybody's looking for consistent sales within a long time frame, within maybe 5 years or so, I think everybody will find that it really fluctuates and that it can really change. Yeah. So I think, we mustn't expect a book to sell all the time, because it does change. For me, it does anyway. You agree with that, don't you? I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. It ebbs and flows. Your customers' tastes change. Customers get older. They get interested in other things. A new competitor comes out. New books are published every single day, and so you can't really ride on the coattails of one book for too long. And I mean, even some of the there are books out there, the Harry Potter series and things like that. Yes, they're still popular, but are they as popular as they once were? You know what I mean? And so, obviously any one of us would probably be happy if we had a series of books that sold like that. But that's just one example of, you need to understand the industry, and you need to understand that that sales are going to change. But there are some things that you can do to increase your book's chances of getting sales, of keeping and sustaining a decent amount of sales. And so I think, again, the big thing is going in, knowing the industry, understanding that, there's the BSR, the bestseller rank. There's a reason why that rank changes every 90 minutes or hour or whatever, however frequently it is because people are always on there buying. And so just because someone has that number one slot now doesn't mean that they're going to have it tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So you need to understand that. And then again, you need to be honest about your book before you can even consider any of these reasons we're going to talk about.
Yeah. And maybe we should add that this is the case for low content, for fiction, for nonfiction.
Yeah.
I think there are slight differences, but on the whole, I think we can say that what we're going to say, what the advice we're going to give in this episode is going to apply to most books, I would say, because I think that there are different things that contribute to a book selling. And I think there's all sorts of things. There's the cover, there's the keywords, and I think maybe if we just sort of focus on a few, but for those of our listeners who are just starting and they just brought out their first book and they're wondering why it's not selling, I think in those cases, I would say it's because it's your first book. It's because no one knows who you are at the moment. Your book is new. You're new as an author. So it takes a little while for a book to establish itself on Amazon, and it takes a little while for people to see your book, and it takes a little while for people to buy it and recommend it as well, because a lot of books, I think, sell on recommendation, and also because if somebody buys your book, the rank goes up, therefore Amazon shows it to more people, and if you get reviews, then people can also buy according to, if the reviews are good, then obviously that helps your book sales. So all of that takes quite a bit of time. And I think that sometimes people can be, and understandably so, they can be a bit impatient when they've just published a book and they're sitting there waiting for sales now. And unfortunately, that's not usually how it works. It does take a little bit of time. And that's the case for any book. I think that also promotion comes into it as well. So there's all these different things that play a part. But what would you say is the main reason for a book not to sell?
Okay, so this is going to probably be controversial because I know most influencers, most quote gurus are going to tell you that it's probably because of your book cover, which is definitely a strong contender. But I think the number one reason for most people is their niche.
Yeah.
You're not niche down enough, maybe. It's hard for your book to be seen if you're in, a sea of tens of thousands of other books. It's just going to be harder, especially like you said, if you only have one or two books out there. So I think that would probably be the first thing I would tell people to check is look at your niche. I'm not saying you have to create a completely different book, but I'm saying, is there a way for you to niche it down? Is there a way for you to and for those people who are new and you don't know what a niche is, just think of a niche as your audience. Is there a way to get a more specific audience instead of, making my book for teachers? Can I make it for a specific type of teacher, a math teacher, and even within those, there's different variations of math. There's early math, like early education math. There's, college math and everything in between, statistics. So if you find a niche, look, you can go on Amazon and look and see what the competition is. Just put in a search term and see how many books are using that same search term. And when you do that for a couple search terms within your niche, within your audience, you can kind of get a feel for how competitive that particular audience is, that particular niche. So I would say for many people, that is the first place that they can better their chances of getting visibility. Because even if you've got the best cover in the world, if nobody can see it, then it doesn't do you any good. So I would say, and I'm not saying necessarily being a niche that's, only has 10 competitors, because if those books aren't selling, then it doesn't matter. So there's a bit of an art to find to dial in your niche. But I would say that if you're in a very broad area, and again, this is whether it's written content or, or no content, low content, doesn't matter. That I would say the first thing I would look at is the niche that you're in. And is there any way that you can make that a little bit more specialized, a little bit more specific, and dial it down just a little bit more?
Yeah, I really, really agree with that because like you said, I mean, the first thing people say is it's the cover, the cover's not right. But it's really, I mean, I've seen books that haven't got great covers, but they're bestsellers.
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely spot on when you say it's the niche or it's the topic or whatever you want to call it. I think a book has to either solve a problem for someone or it has to speak to somebody in a way that they can identify with it, they can relate with it. So I had someone, I think it was a book of poetry. Oh, I've published this book on poetry and I'm just not selling any copies. And I think that poetry is a really good niche.
It is.
People really like poetry, but I think sometimes you have to go deeper than that because if people don't know who you are and they don't know your type of poetry, it's going to be very difficult for them to find your book on Amazon because there's thousands and thousands of books on poetry. And if you can then niche it down to something more specific, poetry for women, but then that's been done as well. So maybe for
Right.
women who are, I don't know, for women who are angry at, I don't know, at men. I was going to say, let's cut this out. Why did I come up with that?
No, that's great. That's great. I will tell you, I think that's probably going to be
that's going to be a bestseller.
That's going to be a pretty big niche itself. I bet you.
I
I've been
bet.
married long enough to know better.
I don't know why I came up with that. That's
You got to
embarrassing.
leave this in. You got to leave that in. That's hilarious.
I don't know. I think let's think of a better example. Women who love dogs. Again, that's very broad, but I think you can see what I mean. It's got to be
Right.
something that really speaks to somebody, and or somebody that has such a busy life that they just can't fit everything in. And if it speaks
Hmm.
to them, they can really relate to that. And
Right.
I think that's where you have to go, unfortunately, with books. You can be very creative and just write whatever you want to write about. But in that case, I think sales are something that is, it's more of a thing that you want to create because you enjoy creating it. But
Right.
if you want to create an income from it, you really have to choose something that resonates with people, that people are actually looking for,
Right.
because that is the only way they're going to find you if you are an unknown author. So, I mean, I've got people I can think of that I love their poetry, but I know them because I've seen them on Facebook. I've found them in the past, and I know who they are now. So I know I want to know when a book comes out, when a new
Right.
book comes out. And that is the way they get their buyers. But if you're not well known, if this is your first book, you have to be very creative in the way you can create your books and then also promote your books.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Our art is completely different. I mean, just think of even before, not even have to do with books, but how many well-known artists were dirt poor
yeah,
when they passed away and didn't start their stuff didn't start selling until long after they died. You know, uh, and so I agree that first of all you have to look at it. Are you in it for the passion or the profit? I personally think you can combine the two. But this goes back to like being honest about your cover. If you only care about the passion behind it and you just want to create this, then that's fine. Then,
yeah,
but understand that the profit might not come or might not come quickly. But if you're, for most of what we're talking about, we're assuming people want to make a profit, and that they want to increase the amount of money they're making and they want to get more sales. So yeah, I would say that that's the number one is knowing your niche, trying to dial it in and kind of sub niche it if you can. And I really think that's going to be the spot where many people will kind of get that aha moment. Unfortunately, depending on what kind of product you create, that may mean you have to kind of tweak your product. Um, I would say the next thing would be probably the cover. And not just, is it a good cover? Because one, that's subjective, but also I've seen amazing covers. Matter of fact, actually just one of my students was complaining that they weren't getting sales, and they sent me their cover, a picture of their cover. And what I did is I took their cover, and it was amazing. The cover didn't speak to the niche that they're in. It didn't, like, it looked like it was for a completely different niche. And so what I did was I actually took it, and I did it on my phone, but I took the picture of it and overlaid it with the top 10 books. Actually, I didn't even use top 10. I used 20 through 30 books in that category, and just put their picture, the picture of their cover next to each of those, and say, you see, your cover is great, but it doesn't look like it's this type of book. And so, I mean, it doesn't matter how much you pay for your book cover. I'm talking about when you look at that book cover, does it tell your audience what's inside? And so even if it's a great cover, it needs to be a great cover for that niche.
That's a really good point, because there's so many things about covers that can go wrong. There's, first of all, I mean, again, I'm talking about beginners. I find that if this is the first cover you've ever made yourself, then that can sometimes be the reason why your book doesn't sell, because sometimes they just look a little bit like my first covers. They weren't very professionally created.
They look amateurish.
They do. I didn't want to say that.
They are.
Yeah,
because they are.
That's exactly what it is. So,
and not necessarily that's not necessarily a slam at anybody's design.
No.
Because I mean, I know people who are they're graphic designers.
Yeah.
But just because you're a graphic designer doesn't mean you design a good book cover.
Yeah. I studied graphic design, and my book covers were rubbish. So.
Right. So I'm not. So again, when I say amateurish, I don't mean amateurish from an art standpoint. I mean amateurish from a book cover standpoint.
Yes.
If it's your first book cover, then you are an amateur. You are new to it. That's not meant as a slam or in a negative way. It's just a fact.
Absolutely, I agree. And that is the main reason sometimes why first books don't sell, because they do look, when you compare them to other books, like they're not as serious or as professional as some of the other books. So that is the first thing, but that you can only really improve over time.
Right.
You practice and you create more books. So there is an element of, when I say quality before quantity, that is very valid, but there has to be some quantity as well, because that's how you learn to create book covers, especially with low content books. So, well, only with low content books, I guess, because it's different for fiction and non-fiction. The cover has to be spot on from the beginning. How many books can you write to practice? You can't really do that. But with low content, there is an element of creating more books to get better at the creation of books. But then there's also, like you said, is it appropriate for the niche? And that's a really big point that sometimes people kind of miss, because on the one hand, I teach people to stand out, because you want your book cover to be different to the ones that are already on Amazon, so that it does stand out. But at the same time, you don't want it to stand out in the wrong way. You don't want it to stand out because it looks nothing like a puzzle book or nothing like a children's book. It does have to fit within that niche. So I think that's really important, just to have a book cover that is actually appropriate for your niche. So that was a really good point. I totally agree with that as well.
Yeah. And and going back to the book covers and the niche that we talked about earlier, a great example is I was actually doing a video probably about a month ago on a specific niche, and I saw there were 6 books in particular, horrific covers. Like, you could tell that they were not only done by the creator, but they were just thrown together. And that's there's no doubt in my mind that these covers were made in 5 minutes each, and they were selling like crazy. The number of because again, that's why I said your niche is even more important than your book cover.
Yeah.
Not to say book covers aren't important, because obviously that was our second one, but having that right niche can really, and having less competition but a hungry audience that wants to consume this, and it's something that's something that they're interested in, can overcome a questionable cover.
Yeah, I can give you a really good example for that, because I bought a diary, and I think it was last year, and I wanted a specific diary laid out in a specific way.
Mm-hmm.
And I found one and I didn't like the cover. And I bought a pretty one where I did like the cover, and I started using it and I just couldn't get on with it. And then I ended up buying the one that I didn't like, because that one I could actually use and it was useful to me. So it just shows that it's not always the pretty cover that sells your books.
Right. And I'll be honest, that and I do see that a lot more with nonfiction, or with no content. But I'll tell you, these 6 books I'm talking about, they're actually written books. They're nonfiction books. I'm not gonna say what they are, because I'm actually gonna go back and recreate those 6, because I know I can do a better cover, and I know I can give a bit more detail in the actual content of it. So those are on my to-do list for books to put out. But yeah, they were selling really well. And again, questionable covers. Okay, terrible covers. But anyway, but the topic was something, it was dialed in, it was very specific, but there was an audience that needed that. And they knew that. And so I mean, like I said, they were selling all 6 of them, and they were not the same brand. They were different. I think there's like 2 or 3 different brands. But the topics, it was all about the same general topic. And so, and again, they were just how-tos basically. So yeah, that was, again, to show that how important your niche is, and making sure that, there's a hungry audience for your content, that you've got a much better chance of getting more sales. And then the second thing obviously is the covers.
Yeah. And I think, everything you just said, and then the other thing is the content, obviously, which is the niche, really, what you said. But also from not just the niche, but also providing great content, providing, I think it's like the example I mentioned about the cover applies to the content. The reason I then bought the new planner, the other planner that didn't have a great cover, was because the content was better, because it was more what I wanted. I wanted to use it for a specific thing, and that's what I needed. So the content has to be good as well, I think. And like you said, I mean, the cover, even though that's the most obvious thing, it's actually probably
that's the first thing people see.
Yeah, but it's probably the least important in the great scheme of things, I think.
I couldn't agree more. And when it comes to the, you were saying that content, I would just call it interior, whatever.
Interior,
is that's not just limited to no content, low content. And this is something that's similar to what you were saying about doing your own book covers. When it comes to writing, that comes, being a better writer just comes from writing more.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So, if it's a nonfiction book, are you answering the questions that people want to know? Are you making it clear? Again, before you even write your book, or at least before you publish it, I would say look at your competition, look at their reviews, positive reviews, negative reviews, and whatever people are complaining about, are you fixing that in your book? Whatever people are loving, are you including that in your book? And making that interior, not just the content of it, like what you actually wrote, but even the formatting. How does it look? Does it look appealing? So all of that is, super important. And while, yes, it does take people finding your book, so the niche, it does take people wanting to click on your book. So, they stopped by looking at the cover, those are important. But when they click on it on Amazon and they see see an example, or whatever they call it these days, look inside feature, read a sample, where they can see the interior, is that something that's going to grab their attention?
Yeah.
Is that something that is going to make them say, I want to buy that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's That's a good point. And I think the other one also that I sometimes think is the fact that someone said to me, I made what was it? It was a vehicle mileage tracking logbook. Why
Hmm.
is it not selling? And I had a look on Amazon to see, and I thought, wow, there are hundreds of them. There are
Right.
so many. So I think another really important or a really valid point is that if you're making a book that's already on Amazon and that where there's several copies of a similar type of book on Amazon, it's going to be difficult to sell your
It is.
book because if there are so many others on there, and it doesn't matter if they're all if some of them are really selling well, by you adding another one doesn't mean that the one that's selling really well is going to sell less. They're going to continue selling their
Right.
copies because they've got the feedback, the good feedback. They've got a track record of making sales, so Amazon's going to push that one.
Right.
And as a newcomer, as a new book, it's going to be difficult to see it among all those other books that are already
Right.
on Amazon. That's why I always say, if you're going to start making books, yes, you can make books that are already on Amazon if you're a beginner. But then once you know how to create your books and you get confident in it, make something completely different because you're not going to compete with what's already out there if you're making the same type of book.
Right.
That's one of
Right.
the things I see very often. Do you come across that where people
I
make?
do. I do. I
Yeah.
think, people need to understand that while we don't need to reinvent the wheel, as they
Mm,
say, um, we need to figure out a way to make our wheel different.
mm,
Why would people buy if again, put yourself in the seat of your potential customer.
yeah.
If they see this, this book right here is quote unquote the same book as yours, but it has, 1,000 reviews with a 4.8 star rating and you have no reviews, why would they get yours? Just because you got a better cover? Probably not.
No.
People pay, there's a lot of most customers care about that social proof that comes with, there's a lot of weight that comes with that social proof of getting the reviews. So if you don't have that, what can you do to make your cover or make your book different? It can still have similar content, but maybe it's just maybe it's a theme. The theme is different that can speak to getting what I said to begin with, getting to a little bit more narrowed down, sub niche, so
Yeah.
maybe you make your cover, like, again, we're talking about uh no content right now, but maybe you've got more of a floral look to yours, and so
Yeah.
now it's people that are interested in tracking their vehicle mileage, but they're into gardening or something along those lines. Again, something that will make them click on your book rather than the other one.
Absolutely. I think, and this is also to do with reviews. And I know that many people say, oh, you have to have reviews for your books. And that's not necessarily the truth. I mean, if I go on Amazon and I'm looking for a planner, for example, and I'm looking for a specific planner and I see there's different planners and one of them has got loads and loads of 5-star reviews and the other ones don't, I tend to go for the one with the reviews. That's true. But if I'm looking for a specific book and there are similar books, but not quite what I want, and the similar books have got a lot of reviews, but the one I find one that I really like and it has got no reviews, I would probably still buy that one rather than the ones that have all the reviews, because it's more to it's the kind of book that I was looking for. So reviews can be helpful, but they're not necessarily, because I know some people ask me, do I have to have reviews to make sales? No, not necessarily. Your book just has to speak to your customers. You have to make a book for your audience. And if it doesn't have reviews, they will still buy it if there's no other relevant books out there
Right.
for them. So,
Right. Which kind of leads me to my next one I was going to say. And this one and the one I have after it are, in my opinion, which is more important kind of just depends on the day, on what my mood is. But I'm going to say keywords.
yeah.
Keywords, and especially on the Amazon algorithm, the way it works is it gives the most strength to your title and subtitle. Why? Because Amazon algorithm is all about relevancy. And so if I type in, mileage tracker or mileage tracking journal, and that's the title of your book, obviously, then that means that there's a better chance that book is more relevant to what I'm looking for than someone who doesn't have it as their title.
Yeah.
Same thing with subtitle and 70 keyword slots or whatever. And that's kind of all kind of joined together. And I've seen many times for those people who had a book that was selling really well and now it's not, keywords are one of the main reasons why, because people's search habits change. The slang, the way people word things, it changes over time. And so if you leave your 7 keyword slots and you leave all your keywords that are in there and you leave them exactly the same over 5 years, that it's going to see a decline. One, because people their purchasing, habits change, but also the way that they search changes. And so if you see that you were selling and now you're not, or you're not selling as much, that's one of the first areas I would look at would be your keywords.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially for low content, the keywords. If it's a planner, you have to put planner in it, if it's whatever. But for fiction and non-fiction, it's even more important, because the keywords you use, and ideally you put them in the title and in the subtitle, they can really change the way your book sells. Because imagine that you're writing an autobiography or whatever, and you call it My Life Story. If you call your book My Life Story, unless you're famous, no one's going to really want to. It's not intriguing enough. But then you can change one word and maybe say My Life Struggle, and then it instantly becomes a little bit more interesting to someone who feels like they're struggling, And then if you can pinpoint it even further and say My Life Struggle with arthritis, or My Life Struggle,
some kind of disease,
illness,
some kind of illness,
instantly you've got your audience there.
Yes.
because they relate to that. So I think that is really important. And you're right, if you're calling your book something and it's not selling, see if you can, it's too late to change the title, but see if you can put any keywords in there that really relate to what you're writing about, and that people can then type in. So you need to do your research before, I think, and see, what kind of book is popular, what do people want to read about. So that's important.
Yeah, and people buy, again, it comes down to knowing your audience, and just in general, people buy based on emotion, whether it's, they want to be happy, they want to be, scared, whatever their purpose is. It's usually based on emotion, something, whether, like I said, whether it's positive or negative. So if you say something like my struggle with arthritis, that pulls on an emotion that they can relate to. And so I absolutely agree that's something. And while, yes, it's ideally you want to do your research ahead of time and know your audience ahead of time, these are things, especially with keywords, that you can tweak over time. Again, you can't tweak the title and subtitle, but other than that, the keyword slots, the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is your book description.
Yeah.
Your book description is this is one of the areas that I see people just drop the ball on, and unintentionally. People have this, from my experience, have this misconception that they need to talk about, especially if they have written books, they have to talk about the story in their book description. A book description on Amazon is not the back, and not to be confused with the back of the book blurb. Those are two different things. Your book description, where is it located? It's on Amazon. Its job, it is your sales page. It is the last chance you have to get someone to click that buy button. They've already seen they've already done their search. They've seen your book cover. They've clicked on it. Now they're at your sales page. There's one thing between them and clicking that buy now, and that's your book description.
Yeah.
And so I see so many areas. Matter of fact, I just did this on one of my Facebook groups. As I said, if I want to do something different, in the comments, if you're not getting any sales, in the comments, send me a link, include a link to your page, and I'll try to see if I can find out what it is. And every single time, there were other issues, but every single time I was making a comment about their book description. That was something that was consistently had areas of opportunity. Some were done really, really well, but maybe they just didn't have a call to action at the end. You know, people need to be told what to do. You know, if, you know, I read all this, now what?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be super salesy. Just scroll up, click buy now today.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Yeah.
Really that simple. That's it, you know, and then just putting in, you know, a little bit bigger font, having it in bold, and the same thing at the beginning of the description, have something a little bit bigger font in bold, and a hook, what I call a hook, something that's like 8 words or less to get people to, you know, to really draw their attention. Because you got to remember also on your Amazon sales page, there's other books. People are advertising their books right against yours. And so your area is bigger than their ad.
Yeah.
So there's no reason for them to click on that ad unless your book description doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
Absolutely.
And each line's job is to do one of two things. It is to get them to continue to read the next line, or ideally click buy now. That's it. That's your book description's job.
Yeah, that's very true. And you're right that the book description is different to the book blurb at the back. But at the same time, I have used both the same, but then just tweak it a little bit, because I have seen a book where it said at the back on the blurb, buy your copy now, and that obviously you've already got it, so that doesn't really have a you know, it shouldn't be on the back of the book, but it should be in your description. So yeah, that's a really important point as well. The description is a place where that sells your books. Definitely.
Well, it's supposed to.
Supposed to,
and if it's not selling your books,
yeah,
then that's something that's an area of opportunity. You know, it's I don't want to say it's a problem, because problems usually mean there's nothing you can do about it. This is something that you have complete control over, and it's also a great place to add in keywords like we were talking about. And Amazon hasn't really shared whether the algorithm is using is searching your book description for keywords. But one place that does is Google. And who doesn't want to be more searchable on Google? You know, I mean, it's just, I mean, it just makes sense. And so making sure that I'm not saying keyword stuff, but making sure that it reads properly, like it was written, you know, not by AI, but it was written by you. And even if you do use AI to create it, which is completely fine, but you know, having it rich with keywords that are relevant to your book. Again, it's all about relevancy. And but again, making it make sense. You don't want something that's going to be, you know, that they have to scroll a bunch of times, especially most people are using their phones nowadays. And so keeping it short, succinct, and just remember what its job is. Its job is to get them to either be, you know, intrigued to read the next line, or enticed to buy the book. And that's it.
Absolutely. And I think apart from that as well, which is, it helps to sell your book, the other main thing I can think of is promoting your book. You know, like when people say, I'm not selling any of my books, how are you promoting your books? That's the other big thing. So you either have to advertise and pay, or you have to use a free way of promoting your books on social media. But that's becoming more and more important, I think. I think the days where we didn't have to promote our books, they're numbered. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's getting more difficult. So you do need to promote your books. Do you agree with that?
I do. I agree with that. And even if you can get organic sales, just remember, while you may not have to run ads or promote or whatever to get sales, it will definitely help you get more sales.
Yes.
And so just think, if you're getting 1 sale a month just organically, how many would you get if you promoted it? You know, how many would you get if you run ads? And there are different ads that you can run just within Amazon. Amazon ads are my favorite, just because, for multiple reasons. But mainly because they're so darn easy to run. They're fairly inexpensive, and people are on Amazon to buy. They already have their wallets out. But also there are different types of ads. You know, we were going back to what you were saying about poetry before. I didn't bring it up because I knew we were going to be talking about it later, but ads, I think, if you write poetry, is one of the best ways to, because like you said, if you're not well known, the way to get your book visible, because that's what it comes down to. you know, you can have the best cover, you can have the best keywords, but if people aren't seeing it, then it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't mean anything. And so, if assuming you're trying to get sales, but so something like with Amazon ads, you can target well-known author, or, you know, well-known poets.
Yeah.
Or poets. I wouldn't necessarily go straight for well-known poets, but I'd go with poets that are in that niche that you're in, you know, that write similar types of poetry, you know,
target your competition.
Exactly.
Kind of,
Exactly.
yeah.
And you can't do that with keywords on KDP, but on Amazon ads, you can target authors, you can target book titles. And so I absolutely would do that in that particular case. And another thing I would do, and I usually don't recommend this type of ad, but poetry is one of the good ones to use lock screen ads, because poetry, certain types of romance, and even children's books I have found to be really good with lock screen ads, because people are so voracious when it comes to reading these, and they're always interested in the next one, that having the ad right there on their Kindle, on their device, to show them the very next one that they could look at. Again, it's not great with, I don't use lock screen ads with 90% of my niches that I'm in, because of that, because it's just not a good fit, especially since Kindle's coming out more and more with ad free devices. But also because of that, they're also fairly inexpensive, even considering other ads types on Amazon. So, but yeah, in general, I would say whether you run ads or any other, you know, social media promotions, author swaps, not review swaps, but author swaps, where, you know, maybe, or email swaps, where this author is sharing your book in their email, and you're going to do the same thing in your newsletter. Things like that. You know, there are creative ways to market your book and promote your book that aren't going to break the bank.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But again, it really comes down to you getting your book in front of more customers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best way to really increase your chance of selling. I would say, just kind of wrap all that up, is before you run ads, make sure that all the other things we just talked about are all dialed in, because you can spend plenty of money on ads and not get any sales if the other stuff isn't there. Do you have A+ content? If it's available in your area, you know, that kind of goes, you know, similar to the book description. Is your book description dialed in? Is your cover dialed in and makes sense to that niche? Are your keywords dialed in? You know, all of these things that we talked about, making sure that they're all on point before you spend money on ads. And then in my experience, it increases your chance of those ads being more successful and getting more sales.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made another good point, A+ content, because a lot of people say, well, I've published my book. Shall I run ads now? And I said, have you done your A+ content? No. I said, do that first, because it's so important, because it's what your customer sees. And if you're running an ad, ads are very, very visual, you know, so you need to have that before you run ads, in my opinion. Other people might disagree, but you know.
I agree. And ads, that when it comes to A+ content, you don't have to have 5 modules, just 1, 2, 3 at the most.
Exactly.
I would say,
yeah.
You just make sure that they make sense. Look at what other selling books have. And I would say, like, if they've got 2 or 3, I would do similar to maybe 2 of them, and then one different. One that makes it stand out. And I would make that different one be the first module that shows in the A+ content. So that way, when they're looking at it, it's just different. And this is not just written books, but no content, low content books, the same thing.
Yeah. That's a great tip. Yeah, make it different as well. Because I'm thinking of someone that copied. Not only did they copy my book, but they copied my A+ content as well. And I keep thinking, do you have to copy everything? You know, and that book isn't selling, obviously, because mine is already selling.
I'll say, why would I buy that one when yours is right there and it looks exactly the same?
I know.
No, that's crazy. But
I know.
But and not to jump back, but one thing that I didn't think to mention when we're talking about the interiors, are you asking for reviews on your interiors? Are you asking people to share, share this book, kind of like what people do with YouTube,
Yeah.
Ask them, if you know somebody else that would like this book, share the book,
Yeah.
tell them about whatever. And again, asking for reviews, those reviews really help.
Yeah.
But
that's a really good tip as well.
When it comes to the ads, one thing I wanted to mention is you'll get in with Amazon ads, you'll get an opportunity to put in a custom text. And you can do this with Facebook ads as well. First of all, always use the custom text. It's just more chances for you to, again, tug at those heartstrings. People buy on emotion. But what I always do, and this has been very successful, and this is one of the secrets I usually don't give out, but I'm going to. I use, when I'm doing my research and I'm looking at my competitors and I'm looking at their reviews and I'm looking at their negative reviews, if I see something consistent that people don't like, I include that in my ad copy. And I say, something like, are you tired of this? Just think of old infomercials on TV. Think of old infomercials. Are you tired of this not working? Whatever you want to word it. And again, people are like, yes. And again, they're drawn on emotion and you're already got them pulled in. And so that's something, like I said, I don't share that too often, but that's something that I do on all of my Amazon ads and even Facebook ads.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. So yeah.
But shh, don't tell anybody.
No, I won't. I keep that to myself.
Well, this has been another great mastermind area. Once again, a huge thank you to all our listeners and viewers who came to tag along. If you enjoyed today's mastermind, please consider following or subscribing to the podcast and maybe even leave us a review and let us know what you thought. Until next time, I'm Keith Wheeler.
And I'm Nuria Corby.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining the Mastermind today. Be sure to follow the podcast on your platform of choice and tell a friend who would enjoy it too. Your support is greatly appreciated. This has been the Masterminding Success Podcast.